So we'll talk about a few items and then turn it over to the assembled masses. First, let's talk about the Purple Line. Obviously, our county and our state is very pleased with the Court of Appeals ruling. It was something that many of us predicted. Judge Leon had gone way beyond his limited authority when it comes to the review of administrative actions. He had gone so far as fundamentally to substitute his judgment for that of the federal agencies. That is not allowed, and it's clear the Court of Appeals is heavily leaning in that direction because they don't grant the kind of relief they granted without finding that there is a high probability that the state will win on the merits as well as irreparable harm by virtue of the action Judge Leon took. So now we are back on track. It remains to be seen the federal government's response to this situation, but we are now eligible for a full funding agreement, and my hope is that such an agreement will be signed shortly. Also, tomorrow on our county council's schedule, there will be the introduction of a bill on minimum wage by Mr. Elrich, and I believe that this basically begins again the conversation with respect to minimum wage. We've had one such conversation, and we will have another conversation, and hopefully we will find a path forward to get to yes. That has been my own commitment with respect to this issue, but it is an issue that there are two competing truths. One is that people work too hard for too little in our county, and the second is that it does have an adverse impact, particularly on our small business community. So it's reconciling those two truths that is, to me, the challenge going forward. The county executive has undertaken a study of the issue, and I believe that study will be released this week. I am so informed. And so that will hopefully inform our conversation as well going forward as to how best we can address this important issue. I'm also pleased that on the agenda tomorrow there are two measures relating to our effort to ensure that there are more accessible taxi cabs on the road. One is a result of the measure that we passed that basically said to Uber and Lyfts of the world, if you are not going to pick up people in wheelchairs, you will have a surcharge that will go to our county. And that surcharge then would be expended on behalf of those who are providing taxi service to our accessible wheelchair community. And so that's what one of these regulations does. It makes it easier for our taxi cab drivers to use accessible vehicles, which are more expensive. Therefore, it gives them more of a reimbursement for doing so, as well as helping them on their gas mileage, which is also more expensive. And the second measure is one that I had sponsored with respect to 12 taxi cabs, basically through the Council of Governments, are all accessible vehicles, and they needed more time to get on the road. So we had previously passed a measure that said you have X amount of time to get your accessible vehicles on the road. We have worked hard to ensure that a co-op has an opportunity to succeed, and this would allow for an extended period of time to get these cabs on the road. We hear all the time how those who are dependent on accessible taxi cabs wait forever. In some instances, have to wait 2 days. They call up and they say, can I get an accessible vehicle? And it literally takes 2 days before they can get service. It's not okay. So all of these efforts are designed to ensure that our disabled community gets a quality of service that they deserve, and we are going to make sure happens. What else do we have that we want to raise? We have a human trafficking prevention bill that will be on our agenda as well tomorrow. I commend our county executive for sending that over. This is an issue that is true in our county as in many other places, particularly when it comes to prostitution. In our county, there is enough of it to warrant our ongoing concern with respect to this matter. And so this will allow the task force to continue and to report regularly to us, and to ensure that we as policymakers have the information we need to go forward and protect our community from being exploited in this way. Another issue that is important and was important to me a number of years ago was increasing teleworking in our county. We also have regulations sent from the county executive that would implement teleworking in our county. It has been a long time coming. I sponsored legislation back in 2014 that set this about, and now we finally have a teleworking policy. There was a pilot program that was worked out with our county employee union. It apparently worked, and now we're going forward with a proposal and regulations that will make it easier for people to telework. We certainly want to encourage that. I remember when I first joined the council that there was comparison with Fairfax County and teleworking that was not favorable to our county. This allows us to at least make a better effort at teleworking in our county government. Why don't I turn it to you guys?
As far as the Purple Line, have you heard anything about when the state might meet with the federal government to try to secure that full funding grant agreement?
I have not.
What's different this time around with the minimum wage bill?
Well, the sponsor of the minimum wage bill did make some modifications to it, particularly with respect to the nonprofit community, giving them a little more time. Did make some additional concessions to those people, for example, in our healthcare world who are dependent on Medicaid reimbursement, recognizing that they don't get reimbursed if we increase minimum wage. So there were some modifications that the sponsor made with respect to this. I think the sponsor appreciates that there may indeed be additional modifications necessary in order to bring about a consensus on this issue. So this basically starts the conversation again. We will have a public hearing at the end of September with respect to this. Well, again, we will have the study from the county executive. So this basically is the beginning of phase two of this conversation.
Is it $15 again in the bill?
It is $15 again in the bill.
Will you support it?
Will I support this measure? I'm not a co-sponsor of this measure. Again, my goal is to get to yes, but it will not take this precise form in my judgment.
What needs to change for you to get on board?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of the county executive study, but again, most of us are looking to see what comes out of that and what guidance it gives us going forward. So as I appreciate that Mr. Elrich, who was the lead sponsor previously, wanted to, I think, ensure that his bill becomes the vehicle by which we address this issue. And I think that will, in fact, be the case. As to future amendments, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself or my colleagues. I simply want to observe that I am expecting a study from the county executive. We have seen other studies recently with respect to this issue. So we want to take all those into account and see, in particular, what we can do for our small business community that, in my judgment, has always been bearing the brunt with respect to this.
On the council agenda Tuesday is a resolution to approve the Purple Line franchise agreement with the Maryland Transit Administration. What exactly is that?
It's pro forma. From my understanding, this is nothing that you wouldn't expect, which is give them access to, this is their property, they get access, things of that nature. Nothing, I am advised, that is of any public policy implications with respect to it. Just a legal, technical requirement that will be before us.
Is that needed for construction to start? Do you know?
I believe it is.
Okay.
They wanted us to act on that expeditiously, and my understanding, again, from our county attorney's office was that this was not a matter that we needed to be concerned about.
Last week, the Regional Transportation Board approved that study of the northern Potomac River crossing. Both you and Mark Elrich went to testify about it in opposition to it. The council unanimously passed that resolution against it. How did that happen? How did that did they recommend this study with so much opposition from Montgomery County and Maryland? Basically, Governor Hogan saying there's no money to fund this. How do you see that? How did that move forward?
There's a reason why I have called this the zombie bridge. There are economic interests that support this effort that will not let it go. In my judgment, we need to get past it. The conversation with respect to the second crossing totally dominated the conversation before the Transportation Planning Board, which reinforced the notion that this will be an ongoing distraction until we get past it. As your question made reference to, this is not a project that brings our region together. This is a project that fractures our region. A majority of Maryland voted against it. A majority of the District of Columbia voted against it. An almost unanimous Virginia voted for it. That's why it passed. Now, the conversation even among those who voted for it was, this is just a study. This is not our ultimate decision, which will be made, I believe, in December as to what to go forward with. And my belief is that the vote in December will have a different outcome. But we will continue to work with respect to that and ensure that this project does not go forward. It is a project that will never happen, and we should focus instead on expanding capacity on 270 all the way and over the American Legion Bridge. Those are real solutions to real problems. A second crossing is a fantasy that will not happen and will distract us from doing the things that we ought to do.
It seems that there's a disagreement from the leader of the county's independent economic board, Bob Buchanan, who heads the 2030 group. He's long been an advocate for this, and he advocated before that vote for this study. Is there a disagreement between county elected leaders and the business group that's tasked with bringing business to Montgomery County?
I believe Mr. Buchanan is speaking in his capacity as the 2030. He has never brought this matter, and my hope is that he would never bring this matter to the Economic Development Corporation. I have shared with him my own view that he needs to make clear that he is speaking in one capacity and not another. He's committed to Montgomery County's economic future, and we strongly disagree with his view with respect to this particular matter. What else, guys?
Last week, Senator Kagan in Annapolis had a hearing on 911 service in the state, and you folks heard about the problems you're having in 911 here. In that hearing, she said that two of her constituents died because of 911 failures here in Montgomery County. So I'm curious, has it come to the council? Is the council aware of any shortcomings of the 911 system, and what is being done about it?
We have had periodic breakdowns of our 911. Our Council of Governments, when I was chair of the Council of Governments, brought this to our Council of Governments for a resolution as well. But our county did an in-depth analysis of the last time we lost 911 service and recognized that we need to have backup service. Basically, this always involves redundancies. Okay, how many redundancies do we have? Because things do break, and you want to make sure that this piece never breaks. So I am not aware of any new information with respect to this. I was not aware of Ms. Kagan's observations or the timing of that particular hearing. I'm not aware that there's been an incident recently. There was, I apologize, I know last year I believe there was such an incident. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of work done with respect to this throughout the region to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But if you go online, you will see that 911 breaks down throughout the country periodically. We are not alone in that regard. But we did do at our request, our county did a very serious look-see at what has to happen to make sure that this system does not falter in the future.
When was that?
Uh-huh.
When was that?
Uh-huh. I can't remember in this moment, but we'll get that to you. Okay.
Sorry, just to go back onto the American Legion Bridge thing, there could be candidates in this upcoming 2018 county election. One running for county executive, possibly David Schroen, who may support this idea. I don't know that he's come out publicly supporting this. And there's also a couple county council candidates who are talking about supporting this new Potomac River crossing in their campaigns. Is that a false thing to sell the community in a political campaign, the viability of this bridge? Is this something that, even candidates shouldn't be bringing up?
I'm not going to advise other candidates as to how they speak to it. I'm not going to opine on candidates generally. I will say to you in my heart of hearts, this bridge will never happen. And so we are often told that it polls well. And my response to that is, so does Tinkerbell, so does Santa Claus. Fantasies do poll well, but that doesn't make them real. And so in a world in which we have real problems, in which we have real solutions, let's focus on those, because this will not happen. And all the studies indicate that it not only will not happen, but it actually doesn't address the congestion issue in the first instance. And that's what makes this so aggravating, is yes, there are some people that use the American Legion Bridge and go back out to Loudoun County. It's a very small percentage. All the studies show that the people that use the American Legion Bridge in 270 basically stay right around the Beltway. So fix that. And our county's council has been pushing for that for years. I started a petition drive on Fix the American Legion Bridge. It is what we really ought to attend to. Not something that would promote sprawl, harm the environment, destroy the agricultural reserve, and perpetuate and add to greenhouse gas emissions. Why would you choose to do that?
More companies want to stay in Montgomery County, like JBG. What's your reaction to, more people signing on to stay here?
Hallelujah. That's my reaction to it. Well, I do think many of us are focused on creating an atmosphere where the JBGs of the world, the Marriotts of the world want to be. And we want to create these kinds of vibrant urban nodes like Bethesda, like Silver Spring, like Wheaton, where there is vitality and where people want to work, particularly our millennials, where people want to come to Montgomery County because it has, oh my goodness, such a great, vibrant center. And if we create those vibrant centers, then you've got people that are moving to Montgomery County, and then they see, okay, I get a little older, I move out into my wonderful residential communities. I put my kids in these wonderful schools. We have terrific assets in our county that I'm proud to say are now being realized by lots of different people.
And on a local Bethesda issue, the Oarsman deal came before the planning board on Thursday, and they largely, approved of the measures. They declined one thing, which was to expand that plaza by 600 square feet. They heeded Oarsman saying that they needed the additional parking. This matter's coming to the county council next. Have you thought about this issue? Do you know where you're at on it? On this deal?
I can say to you that when I was briefed with respect to this deal and when I reached out to many of the trail users thought the deal enhanced the trail. That's my bottom line. Does this deal with Oarsman bring about a better trail experience than we would otherwise have, even going to litigation? So there's no question Oarsman did something that you go, oh, okay, that shouldn't have been allowed. Then the question is, what do we do about that? And if we are being, quote, compensated for what they did in a manner that brings about a better result for the trail than could be achieved through litigation, then that to me seems like a good deal. So that's my presumption going into this without knowing what the planning board did precisely at this moment in time. But assuming that the fundamentals have not been altered, I am predisposed to be in favor of it. And I know that there are a lot of community members who are upset that Oarsman did this in the first instance, and I understand that. But we are where we are now, and then the question is, what's the best path going forward? This strikes me as a deal that is in the public interest if, in fact, it improves the trail experience. You got something?
I do. I know you have, you'll go into more depth tomorrow about the human trafficking issue and the bill. In regard to that, can you give us an idea of what the issues are generally now and what you'll be talking about tomorrow and how you're going to be resolving those issues in regard to human trafficking?
Well, I think the human trafficking issue in our county is not the same as it is, for example, in Texas. We all saw terrible human trafficking in Texas that preys on our immigrant community and those seeking to come to our country. In Montgomery County, we have different sets of issues. They are mostly exploitation of young women and prostitution. And so to me, it is to ensure that we're doing everything we can to help those who are being preyed upon and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to punish those who are preying. So that's the fundamental issue that we see in Montgomery County. All right, gang? Thank you.